Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. I didn't bring my microphone, as I said, so I think there's actually more attending online from China than there are here in the classroom now because of the changes. Today will be our last lecture. There will be videos assigned for the other 2 days, but I'm going to go ahead and cover them more or less today, and so that this lecture video can be processed and be put online, and you don't have to wait for other lectures later. I may actually, I guess, I can tell you I might make the questions a little bit harder on 14 and 15 because you have 2 hours of class that you won't be attending. So, and you don't have a lecture for me to listen to other than today. So, without a lecture to listen to from classes 14 and 15, and without a class to come to on those days, I'll expect a little bit more out of you from watching the videos that are assigned on those days. And they actually on for 15, we'll be watching a couple of videos here, and so I can comment on them, but there'll be two that won't be that we're not going to even hardly talk about today. So those from the 15 and for today and for classes 14, there will be some videos I'll talk about and give you some idea of what is important to me and others that I won't. So like I said, you still are obligated to watch the videos, but there won't be a video of me giving a lecture. Today will be the last lecture. Those of you in China, can you hear me okay? Want to give me a okay on in the chat box? And today will also be the last day that in person that I can answer your questions. You're welcome to send emails with questions, and I might make comments or respond not just to an individual email, but if I think it's something that needs to be said, I'll put it on an announcement and send that out. Okay, it sounds like looks like we're okay with that. You guys can hear me okay in China. So I'm going to go through 3 very short PowerPoints today, and then we'll have time at the somewhere in here, probably before the last. Like I say, I am going to watch a couple of videos towards the end and comment on those. Those who are attending over Zoom can watch those videos at the same time we are. In fact, let me. Yeah, I didn't upload. I will somewhere in here upload those upload those Bilibili URLs onto Moodle so that you can watch them with me if we get to that or when we get to that. Okay, so we do have in all of the PDFs have the Bilibili links to them. I just haven't put the other ones. I think this one I think is online, but 14 and 15 I don't think I made available yet on Moodle, and I will do that even as we're talking. I'm not going to, like I said, there's some things I'm going to talk about here, some things I'm going to skip over and have you watch it on your own. This quiz I was already done, so I didn't actually make it any harder. But 14 and 15 might be just a little bit more challenging because I actually haven't created specific questions on some of those videos ever. So I'm going to make them now. And so I'm not going to talk about it. You just have to be surprised at the video at the Q&A when we get there. Sometimes I've got all this. I guess you can kind of see what's going on up there. I can't always get to the next. It won't go with me to the next slide unless I play a little bit here. There we are. I'm not going to talk about this one. This one has a series of people talking. Starting, it's obviously one of them is Warren Buffett. Let me turn on some lights. There's, I think, about 5 people talking in this one, and I can guarantee there will be a question about it. So you should take a look at that video, but I'm not going to talk about it today. I'll let you watch it, and it's better that you get it from these famous people. I'm going to talk a little bit about this um, video because it's kind of meshes in. In fact, I think I've already introduced you to Guy Kawasaki, maybe in the last class. At least I had a PowerPoint related to this actual video in the last class because it kind of related to what we were already talking about. Guy Kawasaki probably kind of stole some of his ideas a little bit from Clayton Christensen. He just gave him different names. And so I summarized some of his ideas in this PowerPoint here. And so this gives you a good heads up for, obviously, for the quiz. But I want to talk about these and kind of explain what he had in mind with these, I think, 10 points, 10 things he learned from Steve Jobs. We have two videos, and I can't remember which one's named what. But anyway, The Art of Innovation is probably what this one's called, because that's what it says on top of my slide. Make meaning, not money, is somewhat self-evident, but he's just talking about if you're going to start a company, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, do something that has value beyond just making money. If all you're thinking about is making money, you probably won't make as much money. If you actually have a passion for something and you feel strongly about kind of your mission in an entrepreneurial setting or a management setting or whatever it is, in other words, you're making meaning, then the money will come. That's not to say you don't make a business plan, but that you, for example, the project that I'm working on with some other really smart guys, to develop ultimately more than courses in more than 1,000 languages, 1,000 target languages, and 1,000 instructional languages. Nothing anywhere like anything like that has ever been done before. We would actually like to eventually get to the 7,000 languages in 7,000 languages. Like, as I mentioned before, when you do the math, that means 49 million possibilities of how they link together. And some of those are not possible. There are languages among the 7,000 plus, nearly more like 7,400. There are languages without any, they're not written, they're only spoken, for example. So how would we use that language? So some are just impossible. But the dream is to do as many of those combinations as possible with two goals that seem conflicting, but they're not, we don't believe. One goal is that we want to save the world's languages and cultures. With the global economy we have now, really if you're going to make any money in the world today, you're going to have to know at least one of the top 100 languages, and probably more than one. But depending which ones you know. If you're American, English may be enough. But otherwise, most of the world is deciding they need to know English if they want to be in business, right? And so that means for a lot of the world, they need to know at least two languages to get to where they want to go. But even if, you could probably, undoubtedly you could get rich if all you knew was Russian and you had the whole CIS part of the world to work in. Or if you know Mandarin and you're going to do something that's purely for China. It's possible to know some of those other top 100 languages and still achieve, wealth and so forth. But if you're among the other, 7,000 languages, that's not one of the top 100, good luck with trying to get rich. A lot of them are, tribes out in the middle of the Amazon jungle or something. They're, to them, they may be rich, in their grass hut and their beautiful streams and so forth. And I'm not even going to argue with that. They may, in a sense, they are rich. But certainly in our global economy and our global society, you're not going to get very far without knowing one or more of the top 100 languages. So what's that going to lead to? That's going to lead to most of the other languages disappearing. because people want to progress. They want to be able to make a living. They want to provide more for their families. And so language after language after language over the next few decades are going to disappear. And there's probably going to end up ultimately with maybe the top 100 languages. The other ones are going to be gone unless somebody tries to save them. And so part of our goal is totally altruistic, which is save the languages. And saving the languages, you save the cultures. Without the languages, you probably lose the cultures and so forth, because they're so intertwined. So part of it is we know we're going to lose money on, because after going back and forth, and probably almost all the profit will come from teaching the top 100 languages in the top 100 languages, and that's more than anybody else is doing. There's not a company in the world, I don't think, that has more at this point than 100 courses. They have most of the biggest companies are teaching English, and so they're teaching some of these other languages in English, or they're teaching English in, actually not very many of them. There's only a few of them that even teach English in these other languages. So if you want to learn the other language, you have to learn English first, unless you just happen to have some tie, maybe in Kazakhstan you might, if you speak Kazakh, you can learn Russian because it's there. But there are just not very many companies that are teaching very many of the combinations of the top 100, the top 100 languages. And so I'm not sure. I think the biggest one I know of teaches about 100 languages as far as target languages, and a few of those are English and these other languages and so forth. So that's one of our goals, and the other goal is to make money. But we think we can make enough money, perhaps just selling those 100 languages, that we can help then use those profits to help save the other languages. So in reality, it's not just make money, but it is to teach. I should say the second goal is to help people make a better living in the world by learning the top 100 languages, especially, more easily. And one of those keys in learning a top 100 language is to learn it in your own language. So you have the instructional language in your own language to help you understand the grammar and the rules of the new language. So we think by teaching English, for example, in 1,000 different languages, people will learn English easier. And so and that's true for the other top languages as well. So we think we can help people who are among those who speak other languages to achieve more by learning the top 100 languages, especially, and and yet at the same time save those other languages for the future. But it's almost inevitable that people are going to start concentrating in the top 100. So anyway, make meaning, not money. With that philosophy, I think we will sacrifice some profit, but that's okay. We're willing to do that because we're making meaning, not just money. Make a mantra of your meaning. He actually is kind of anti-Covey in this sense. He doesn't think a mission statement is that important. He kind of makes fun of mission statements, and I don't think it has to. I think a mission statement is still worthwhile. But he also is right from a marketing perspective. He wants to break your mission down to about 5 words, and he wants those 5 words to be really important words. And so basically, make a slogan, if you would, a mantra, as he calls it, that can tell what your company does in just 5 words or less. And if you can do that, then it makes all of your marketing easier. And so a mission statement's nice, but you don't market yourself with a mission statement. That's what you concentrate on. Like, we can make a mission statement for our company about, saving the world's languages and cultures and whatever. And it would be quite complicated, and most people wouldn't care what our mission statement was. There are some who do care. There are some who are volunteering to work with us for nothing because they like our mission. So it can be worthwhile, but for marketing, it's not worth much. A mantra, he's right, I think, that from being a marketer myself, a mantra is more important than a mission statement. But the mantra should represent in just a few words what you're all about. What are you selling? What is it you bring to the world? And if you can say it in a few words, it's much easier than to market. Jump to the next curve. That's really more or less disruptive innovation. You want to know what hasn't happened yet, what will be the next big deal, and you want to get there before anybody else. So you want to jump to the next curve. If you want to become wealthy in this world, figure out what the next curve is. Now, again, that next curve um, may not be brand new technology. It may be the use of the technology to achieve something. And so, yeah, I'm not going to pass attendance today. Just I'll take attendance by your doing the quiz. That'll be the attendance. Yeah. Yeah. Since nobody's here, there's no point passing the roll because that's not going to be significantly represent who's attending. And already I was doing that with the Chinese student. Yeah, it means you paid some attention somehow, even if you're not here, because you're not required to be here, right? So there's no point taking attendance at some place you're not required to be. So like with the China students, that's how I taking their attendance is are they doing the quizzes and stuff. So um, anyway, so jumping to the next curve is important, but it doesn't necessarily, as I said, mean that you have to create a new technology. It means you have to think of a new way to apply technology, a new business plan somehow to, and as Dr. Christensen says, the best way if you're trying to break into a real competitive market is to find the non-consumers, as he calls them, the people who, for example, can't afford what other people are producing, and you figure out a way to help them afford it, even if it's crappy. And in fact, that's one of the later ones is don't worry, be crappy. And that again is stealing the idea from Christensen and the idea that you get to market, you get to something that is innovative, you get to something that where there is hopefully a bunch of non-consumers, and then one of the other things he said here then is churn baby churn, and that means once you come out with something crappy, you start getting it better and better and better as quick as you can. And so that's what he said. That's what Apple did. Their first apples that came out were like toys. They sold them like toys. They weren't very good, but they got out and they churned, baby churned, and they started improving, improving, and improving until they came to be known as the best computers in the world. And so all of these kind of go along with what Dr. Christensen was saying. You jump to the next curve, find something where the consumers need something, make it better. In the case of Apple, ultimately became more expensive, but at least it got to the market and then worked on becoming the class of the computer world. It didn't start that way. It started as a toy, and they worked towards that brand, you could say. Um, Along with that, is it one of them? He obviously using a play on words. Some of you are familiar with what he's making fun of or what he's playing with. So there's the idea of rolling the dice, like taking a chance. But actually, what he's saying is roll the dicey. When I first listened to the video, I thought he was saying roll the dice, but he's actually saying roll the dicey. And what he means is you want something cool. And so, yeah, certainly it has some double meaning. Is that you are anytime you're an entrepreneur, you're taking a chance. But he's saying, like Apple, is try to make it cooler than the competition. It doesn't cost much to be cooler. For example, Apple came out with with different colors of computer, whereas IBM was all black. What did it cost to make a color computer? Not much. And so they did a number of things to make theirs cooler than the competition. And that's what he was saying, kind of the idea of roll the dicey is to think of how you can be cool and go towards that. Be cool. Be good, be cool, be elegant. Don't just be functional. Um, I kind of jumped around a little bit. The idea of let 100 flowers blossom. In parentheses, says what you are selling is not what consumers are buying. Thank heaven. And he gave his example of PageMaker. I was one of the first desktop publishing gurus in the world. I kind of grew up with that technology. I adopted it and started teaching a journalism class at a college. I may have taught the first college level desktop publishing class in the world in the late 1980s. I started using it and teaching it to my students, my journalism students, to produce their student newspaper. At the same time, I was an editor at a daily newspaper. We were using professional pagination that was not desktop publishing. It was much more expensive. The professional pagination system that they sold us was the size of this lectern. It had 2 keyboards, 2 screens, and a joystick to move stuff around. It didn't have a mouse. And it was quite complicated. And it cost, I think they said they each one cost $100,000. And so with 10 editors or so that needed to produce pages, we had only 2 of those in our newsroom. And then we had 2 in the advertising department that we could take over at night. So when we got to our late deadlines, our last deadline was midnight, we could have 4 machines. But even that, we were always bottlenecked. These were so expensive, and they couldn't afford more than 4 of these industry-grade paginators. And so it wasn't long. It's like, once I got in desktop publishing in 1980, I guess it was 87 when I got into desktop publishing. It was soon thereafter I was telling them, you need to dump these paginators. They're not any better than desktop publishing, and you can only afford 4 of them. You've got 10 editors fighting over 4 paginators, plus the advertising designers. So you really have like 20 people fighting over these 4 paginators. It's ridiculous. Desktop publishing might be a little bit slower than the paginator, but it's just as good. And if everybody had their own desktop publishing software and their own computer, then it would be much better for everybody. It took a couple of years to convince them, and they weren't actually convinced until the company that had sold them the paginators asked them for $30,000 a piece to upgrade the software in it. And so that's when they realized, I guess we're going to buy a bunch of Apples, a bunch of Macintosh, big Macintosh computers, and go to Quark Express is what they went to at that time there. So I've used about 4 or 5 different desktop publishing, probably 5 desktop publishing systems in my life. But anyway, getting back to what I have to be careful. His name is Kawasaki, I think, and then we're going to talk later about Robert Kiyosaki. So I get the 2 names a little bit mixed up. Anyway, Kawasaki then is saying that what happened with Apple is that they were dying. They were about dead, except that Aldous came along. At that point was the name of the company that developed PageMaker, the first desktop publishing system. And so, they thought they could compete with, good, word processors and spreadsheets and stuff like that, but they weren't any better than what was available through IBM and IBM associated computers. And so they were about dead when Aldous came up with desktop publishing, and everybody who wanted to do desktop publishing realized that Apple was a lot better for desktop publishing. And that saved the company. And so it wasn't their product. He said basically they saved us because so the idea of once you come out, it may be somebody else who saves you, somebody else who figures out why you're important, and you didn't even know that you were important for that reason. But in this case, it was all the people who had to do design work on computer who saved Apple, saved Macintosh, Apple products. Polarized people. just the idea that everybody's going to be upset with you. And any product that is going to move into a market and be successful is going to make people mad. Make them mad. Don't worry about it. That comes with the territory. I mentioned already churn, baby churn is just, come in cheap, come in crappy, and get it better and better and better. Niche thyself is just the idea of take a look at, find your niche in the market. And he makes a chart that I'm probably gonna. It's gonna be hard for. I should have made a copy of it and put it on my PowerPoint. I forgot. I didn't think about it. But basically, he had on the scale here on one, on this chart. On one side is how unique is your product, and the other side is how valuable is your product. And the idea is if you have a product that is not unique and not valuable, you're dead. There's no point making a product that's not valuable and not unique. On the other hand, if it's unique but not valuable, that's not real good either. If it's valuable and not unique, in other words, you have a lot of competitors, that's hard. But if you can come up with a product that is both unique and valuable, that's the area where you want to be. So that's the niche you should try to go after, a product that is both valuable and unique, and then you've got yourself a market. Perfect your pitch. It says basically that your pitch, kind of going back to the second one, make a mantra of your meaning. Kind of the same idea is you have to come up with the perfect pitch for your product. In the marketing world, they frequently talk about the elevator speech. The elevator speech is what you can tell somebody about your product by the time the elevator gets to the top floor. So you're standing in the elevator, and if you're a salesperson, you might ask somebody to break the ice. You might say, "Hi, by the way, what do you do?" And the guy says, "Well, I sell vacuum cleaners," and he automatically asks you, "Well, what do you do?" Oh, well, now you have your 20 seconds. You have 20 seconds to tell that guy what it is that you do that's of interest, hopefully, to him. So the elevator speech is kind of perfect your pitch. Figure out what you can say in a short amount of time, and that doesn't mean only 20 seconds, but that's a place to start. You start with your elevator speech, and you move from there. You need to perfect your pitch, because you're pitching your product to somebody. You're pitching it to an investor. You're pitching it to employees. To get the best employees, you've got to convince them that you're the best company for them. You're pitching it, obviously, to consumers. Whoever those consumers are, they could be consumers with the small c, so to speak, and they could be businesses, or whoever your consumers are for your product. You have to pitch your product to lots and lots of people to be successful. So anyway, I'll leave it there, but those are some of the keys that he's talking about in that video. Anyway, like I said, there's Guy Kawasaki has 2 videos, and I just covered basically one of them pretty well, but I would suggest watching the other one as well. This is, you should have already, if you haven't watched the video yet from last class, you should. This is Mark Andreessen, who I mentioned created the first really good web browser, Netscape, that I still use. And he and his partner, I also have a video from his partner, Ben Horowitz, have a venture capital company in Silicon Valley, and they're one of the biggest venture capital companies in the world. And so he basically took his money, and also Horowitz also took a product to public. So when you go to public and start selling your stock to a company, you usually make a lot of money in the process. And so both Andreessen and, even though their companies eventually were bought out or died or whatever, and over a period of time, they both made a lot of money through their different products. And Andreessen actually took 2 products to public, made a lot of money off of both of them. One of those was Netscape. Anyway, so he has his 10 rules of success. Have courage. And basically says anybody who wants to be an entrepreneur has to have courage. and they look for that. As they look for money, look for people who to invest their money into. They want somebody who's not just has a good idea and courage to follow it through. If they don't think that person has the guts to suffer through some hard times, they don't want them. They're looking for, yes, innovation and courage both. Nail the product. If you don't have a good product, you don't have a company. So they're definitely looking at what is your product, and as Kawasaki said, is it unique? Is it valuable? That sort of thing. That sort of analysis. Is this a product that there's a market for? So they have to do that market analysis themselves before they invest any money. Having good timing. Sometimes you're just lucky. For example, before Facebook, I had an account. What was it called? There was another social media just like Facebook almost. Forget what it is now. But anyway, Facebook was lucky, basically. The other company already had a lot of people, but it just didn't fly. I mean, it was quite popular, but Facebook came in and killed it. Why didn't it? Why wasn't it able to hold on against Facebook? I don't really. Well, he thinks it's just they were just lucky. Their timing was right, and so some things you don't control. And so you have one person, well, like Netscape. Netscape comes in. It was the most popular web browser at the time, but they didn't have all the financial aspects of it figured out yet. This is brand new, and it came out just a couple of years after the web was created, and so it was, like I said, one of the earliest web browsers created, and so it hadn't figured out a good business plan for how to make a lot of money, and Google came along and put them out of business basically by coming up with a better business plan. So it wasn't that Google was better in its browsing. It wasn't better in its browsing, but it was better in its search, and it got money off its search, figured out how to make money from search. And so Google basically put Netscape out of business. So he was probably looking at this from a very personal perspective, that Netscape was on the top and it got knocked out. And so some of it was timing, and some of it was better strategy, certainly too. Kind of going back to the have courage is be determined to succeed. Again, be willing to sacrifice at almost any cost, any cost ethically, legally. So it's very, very closely related. Punch through the status quo is that it's always hard if you have a new idea, new product, is to break through the status quo. People are, by the very nature, satisfied with what they have, pretty much. And so you have to make your product so much better that they can't. I think I'm just seeing if you had a different item there. And maybe it might be his partner, actually, Ben, that puts it in these words. You have to be so good they can't ignore you. I think maybe Ben will come to that with his partner saying it in those words. You have to break through the status quo. You have to be so good that they can't ignore you. And so it's kind of the same idea, although, again, I think it's his partner that put it in those words exactly. Because there's resistance to anything new. And there's people with a lot of money trying to stop you, in essence. There are no silver bullets. He says when people have they start their business and they're having a really hard time, and they're hoping that there's some silver bullet. There's something's going to save them. And he said, probably not. There's a whole bunch of lead bullets. There's not a silver bullet. There's a whole bunch of lead bullets, and you better just start shooting. If you want to survive, you need to use a lot of lead bullets and do everything you can, improve your product, improve your sales approach, improve your, whatever. You have to look at what you're doing and go after and improve everything you're doing. And that's basically the lead bullets. There's no magic potion to make you succeed. If you're looking for the silver bullet, that's going to the perfect thing to help you succeed, you're probably going to fail because it probably doesn't exist. And so to succeed goes back to being determined and having courage, and basically you start shooting a lot of lead bullets to succeed. Train people up is the idea that, especially in technology, things are changing so fast that there are never enough people to fill all the roles with their current skill set, because you're getting new programming, new just so many different things. And this is true not just in technology but in marketing. I've been writing book chapters about new approaches to marketing over the last 5 years. Everything's changed in those 5 years. I have not been able to keep up with the changes in marketing in writing chapters about them. It was changing. In fact, I realized when I wrote the first chapter about 4 years ago now about marketing, I realized in the time, I knew the book publisher, this is one of the problems with book publishing, the book publisher was not going to come out, and I started writing that chapter in the spring. We were handing it to the publisher in the fall. It was not going to come out till the next early summer in June, I think they thought. And I realized even in October, it was already outdated. Before I handed it to the publisher, my chapter was outdated. And I knew that. And they weren't going to come out for another 9 months. So in marketing and anything that's being technology driven, it's really tough to keep up. And so one of these areas is in training people, whether they are marketers or technologists, programmers, anybody being affected by all these changes in technology. It's hard to find good people. And so his perspective is take the people you have and train them. You have to invest in those people. He said currently there's some of the new programming languages that they've created kind of boot camps where you can send somebody to Montana for a month and they come back all trained in something new. And of course, they don't have to be trained at all at that point. There's people who got a degree in some sort of in humanities or something, and the best thing for them is go pay for a month of training in programming, and so they can get a real job because there are no jobs in the humanities basically. And so there are boot camps like that around the world to help people keep up, or with new languages, new technologies, and so forth. And so he's just saying you just have to plan on it. If you're on the cutting edge, you have to plan on keeping your people trained up. Don't go thinking you're going to find new people with every new programming, new technology, so forth, because they don't exist. If you're going to be on the cutting edge, by definition, on the cutting edge, there are not people ready for you. But one of my chapters on marketing, they did a survey of marketing executives around the world, and they all said they were being asked to do stuff they'd never been trained to do. They were very frustrated. They had decided, a good share of them decided they would go hire young people coming right out of college, and it turned out the kids coming out of college had not been trained either. And so here they need people who know how to market, and they do not exist because universities are not doing their job. And it's very, as I mentioned, in my writing book chapters about it, I can't keep up writing book chapters. And so if somebody buys the book that my chapters are in to be trained on how to do marketing, guess what? It's already old by the time it was published. And so it's very hard to keep up in anything related, anything being influenced by this modern technology and so forth. So actually there are some in marketing now, they're starting to realize they have to actually, rather than hiring somebody trained in marketing using some of the new technologies and stuff, they're starting to hire technologists and making them marketers, because the technology is the part that they lack. And so they're hiring technologists and bringing them in and making them part of a marketing team. And so the technologist can understand the marketing aspect, and the marketers can depend on the technologist to carry out what needs to be done. One of the newest areas in marketing, for example, is called programmatic advertising. And I haven't looked at the statistics lately, but with my last chapter I wrote 2 years ago, the basically that the according to surveys, the big corporations in the world were saying we're going to bring our programmatic advertising in-house. And basically the specialty consultants doing it were just laughing at them because there were no people for even the biggest corporation in the world to hire who had skills in creating programmatic advertising, the software needed to run programmatic advertising. I'm not sure exactly, why a major corporation couldn't buy somebody out of one of the consulting firms, but it wasn't happening. At least there weren't enough of them. And so the big corporations wanting to bring programmatic advertising in-house were failing. They couldn't do it. Programmatic advertising is through programming to search the internet for the best buys, which frequently are not the ones that you know about, frequently not Facebook and not Google and not the other social media. There are lots of other websites around the world that give you more for your money because you don't know, nobody knows about them. And so programmatic advertising finds those, and it's also built with some AI with it to, first off, actually negotiate a price with these other websites. And then it goes through all it analyzes their demographics, and then you also program into it all of the ads and social content marketing you've done in the past, and it analyzes and matches the demographics of this website with what you've done in the past and suggests what you should do now. So all of that is rather complicated and involves some AI and involves some wide searching and actually has to do, like I said, they do the negotiating through the software. And that's for that reason, though, university can't teach that. They can't find, if the corporations can't find somebody to do it for them, the universities are not going to find people to teach it. So it's one of those areas that I'm presuming is still out of reach for any university, and yet it is one of the number one trends in marketing is programmatic advertising. And so you can't hire a recently graduated student from a marketing program anywhere in the world and expect them to come in and create programmatic advertising for you. They just don't exist. They aren't trained properly. So it gets very complicated. And so again, he's saying, what you can, the best you can do is try to train them up. And even with programmatic advertising, they have a hard time finding anybody to train them up. So we'll see how that goes. Again, I think it's a little bit maybe going back. Raise the average first, number 9. That's the idea of one idea, and I know his partner talks about this too, is that companies, first off, the executives tend to hire somebody not as smart as they are. And on average, it actually then kind of, as people in the company, they also give them promotions, even if they're not smart enough to really be expert at the next level up. And so by promoting people that aren't really expert enough that they really deserve to be promoted, and by hiring people that are a little bit stupider than you are, a company basically is destroying itself by lowering its average quality of employee. And so his point and his partner's point both is you should be trying to work the quality of your people up. First off, hire people smarter than you. Don't hire people stupider than you. Hire people smarter than you, and hire people smarter than the people at his level. So if you have a certain level of executive, don't hire somebody and don't promote somebody that's not as good as they are. Don't hire somebody not as good as they are. Hire somebody better than they are, and raise the average at every level of your organization. Otherwise, you're dooming yourself. You're going to dumb down your company to a degree that others will overtake you and destroy you. So that's the idea of raising the average. Understanding your idea perfectly is, again, a little bit, like what Kawasaki said of, to perfect your pitch. Know how to sell what you have. So this is another one by Andreessen. I didn't put any notes on that one, I don't think. So um, another one that you'd want to watch, though. Very smart guy. And this is his partner, Ben Horowitz. And this is his 10 points, 10 rules, and you'll see some overlap. And some not so much. Learn people skills is the first one. And this, again, this is one of those videos where they take excerpts from other presentations. And so he didn't actually make this list. Somebody else made this list for him from all of his other presentations. But learn people skills, I may have mentioned already, but when, I worked for at least for long, I did some consulting work for other companies, but I basically had fairly long stays at two technical consulting firms where I was the marketing director. And both of my bosses, I'm sure I think I probably mentioned this the first week, but both of my bosses, both CEOs at both those corporations told me, Ken, I wish, almost exactly the same words even, Ken, I wish that I had taken more communication courses. Because being an engineer, obviously I need engineering skills. But that's not where you make money in this industry. You make it through communications. Can you sell your ideas? Can you sell your expertise? And so even though they had both come up to become CEOs, they realized they could have been CEOs of bigger companies. They could have achieved more if they had learned better communications. And meanwhile, as I think I suggested before, you may have somebody smarter than the CEO working in the back room behind his computer that nobody ever sees him because he doesn't have people skills at all. The CEOs have some natural people skills or they wouldn't be CEOs. But for every CEO, there's other people every bit as smart without people skills that are locked into an office someplace and actually doing most of the work. So learning people skills, communication skills is very, very important. It's too often overlooked. And one of the main reasons why a lot of companies die is not because they have bad technology or bad ideas. They just don't know how to communicate those ideas. Communication is very, very important. Think for yourself. He was talking about he was, I think he was going to Columbia University, which is more of a has a lot of humanities and social sciences and stuff like that, but it also, has technology courses. Anyway, he decided, he was looking around, deciding what he really had a passion for, and what he decided to become a computer engineer. Or I'm not sure exactly what his major was. And all of his friends just made fun of him and said, you're at Columbia University. You're talking about learning a trade, basically, is their perspective at that time. You're learning a trade. You shouldn't be, this is the university that teach you how to be a professional, not learn a trade. And of course, they really snickered at what he was doing. And of course, he became the billionaire, and they are still working for, wages someplace. So his point is, sometimes it's your best friends or your parents who will try to dissuade you from doing what you feel a passion for and what you feel like you can really be excellent at. So even whether it's your parents or your friends or whatever, don't listen to them. Follow your passion, and become great at what you want to become great at. Obviously use logic and don't be stupid about it, but at the same time, don't let somebody who doesn't capture the vision talk you out of it, who just doesn't understand, as his friends didn't understand. Try to do something important. It's kind of the idea of make meaning, as Kawasaki was saying. If you're going to do something, if you're going to invest your life into something and undergo, especially as an entrepreneur, undergo some really tough times. When I bought my first publishing company, there were nights when I didn't get any sleep. I would or I would get like 1 hour of sleep. I would get so exhausted, I would clear off my desk, and there were kind of mice running around the floors and stuff. Not a lot of them, but still, I didn't want to go sleeping on the floor and have a mouse run over me. And so I would clear off my desk and sleep on top of my desk for an hour or so before I'd get up and finish my newspaper or whatever the project I was working on. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, you're going to suffer some. And so at least suffer something worth suffering for. Do something important, um, and so that you can feel good about it when you're done suffering. Uh, Follow your contribution. So another kind of the same idea is figure out what you really can contribute to the world and pursue that. Um, Again, if you're going to suffer for something, be it something that you have a passion for and what you're good at. I guess that's also, I think, part of what he was saying is, uh, in fact, I think he did say very specifically on this one, come think about it, is when people say just follow your passion, he's saying not necessarily. If you're good at something, then you can make a bunch of money without necessarily, a computer engineer doesn't necessarily sleep at nights dreaming of engineering. But if he's good at it, he can make a big contribution and make a lot of money as a computer engineer. And so, even if it's not so you kind of have to balance those two. So, yeah, it may not be something you really have a passion for, but you see you have a contribution through it. And so you have a passion for making a contribution, not necessarily for, dreaming of engineering or something. Follow your contribution, not just your passion. Work hard, I think is stated, you're going to have to succeed. Don't quit, you're going to want to. One of the things he said was the company that he created, and I wasn't familiar with the company, but he created one company and he had a bunch of employees and the company wasn't succeeding. And he felt an obligation to his investors, felt an obligation to the employees, but he wanted to give up. He said basically, if it hadn't been for that sense of obligation, he would have given up. He would have just closed the company. But he felt like he owed something to employees and to investors, and so it was that what kept him going. And he makes kind of a joke. He said, I slept like a baby, woke up every 2 hours at night and cried. Basically, it was so miserable going through that period of time as he was trying to save the company. And ultimately, he did have to lay some people off, and he changed the whole mission of the company to try to find a new niche because what he was doing wasn't working. But he was able to save a lot of the jobs and the investments and end up, I think it was HP bought the company from him for a couple $1 billion or something. So he was ultimately came out really good, but it was a long, hard road to get there. And he was actually amazed that they paid him as much as they did after all that. But he ultimately made a bunch of money and made money for his investors and, made things good for his employees. Get leverage. And that goes back to, he said leverage is, for example, it goes back to a lot of stuff we've been talking about. Among other things, going back to Covey, the idea that you need to be the leader and not the manager is that part of this, and also goes back to what his partner said as far as hiring really good people, better in a day. Indeed, he's saying hire people better than yourself and then let them do their job and you be the leader. So it's kind of a mixture of these other ideas we've talked about. If you are going to make your company succeed, you need to be the leader. That doesn't mean you need to be the best engineer. It doesn't mean you need to be the best at anything. You can hire people to be the best at what they do, and that gives you leverage so that then it frees you up so that you, and from the perspective of Robert Kiyosaki that we're going to talk about a little bit later, it frees you up to not even come to office if you don't want to. So that's the good side, but also it frees you up to be the leader, to have the vision, to lead the company with new ideas and so forth that are not necessarily, the people you hire can do their jobs better than you. Let them do their jobs, and you again, make the decision, higher up decisions, follow the vision. Make a difference. Again, it kind of goes back to some other things he said. You make your contribution, ultimately make a difference. You want to do something that will make a difference in the world. And ultimately, you have to do the hard things. And this may be where he said, one of the things he mentioned was he read during that time when he was failing, he read all sorts of management books and basically decided all of them were stupid because they were, like rah-rah ideas and all these ideas he had tried. But when you get into a situation where you feel trapped, like he did, and you did not know where to go, there's no book about that. There's no book can tell you how to get out of your trap, your misery at that moment. The books aren't written like that. They're written they're Dr. Covey books and Dr. Christensen books, yes, but there's none of them. He could not find a book to tell him how to get out of his mess that he was in. That you just have to go through the hard stuff. You do the hard things. You cry yourself to sleep at night, maybe, but you punch it through. You do it, and there's no book for that. Ultimately, there may be books that will help you when you get started, but those books are not written to help you when it gets hard. They don't exist. Okay, so that's actually all the slides I have for 13. And here are their URLs in both YouTube in most cases, in this case, every case, and in Bilibili. I'm going to close that one and open up another one. Go to 14. When I open up too many, then the graphics don't come out. So I can only open one at a time, and I hope the graphics come out as I close this one and open another one. So I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to talk a little bit about all of the PowerPoints in 13, 14, and 15, and then I'm not going to do any more lectures after today. So that's what I'm doing. So out of 14, again, we've got all the, I don't think I have this one visible, at least yet, on, but I have in the PowerPoint, we have all the Bilibili links and so forth. I will get this up this evening yet, so you have access to these URLs, again, in both, wherever it came from, usually YouTube and also in Bilibili. Okay, so we get to Robert Kiyosaki. We talked about him a little bit, I believe, in the past. He authored one of the most, one of the recent videos said the highest selling book on, I'm not sure what they qualified for, investments. I'm not sure exactly what they said it was, but it was one of the highest selling business books ever written, called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I think I may have talked a little bit about that. His dad was actually an extremely smart person. He was the head of education for all of the state of Hawaii in America. He got a PhD from one of the top universities in America, extremely smart. His dad, he says, is the poor guy. He's the poor man. His friend's dad had to drop out of school when his dad died to take over his dad's company. His education was talking to the company's accountants and tax people and marketers and so forth. He got his education from people who actually knew what they're doing in the business world. He didn't have a high school degree, did not have a college degree. His rich dad, his friend's dad. And at a very young age, Robert wanted to understand, well, one thing he wanted to understand was why didn't they teach in school how to become rich? And in fact, his dad, he asked his dad that question. They don't let us teach that. They literally don't let us teach how to become rich. They teach us how to be employees. That's what they teach. So they teach us how to make somebody else rich, basically. And so at some point, his dad said, if you want to learn how to become rich, go talk to your friend's dad. He's an entrepreneur. So in other words, the friend's dad, who hadn't finished high school, was the one his dad, the PhD, told to, if you want to learn how to become rich, go talk to him. And so he did. He basically went to his friend's dad and said, "Teach me how to become rich." And his dad, that the rich dad, so to speak, basically laughed at him. But ultimately, he said, "Well, you just start coming to." He let him come to his business and come. He said, you're just going to do whatever I tell you to do. I'm not going to pay you ever, but you can watch how I become rich." And so that's what he did. For a number of years, he just went and worked for the rich dad without pay. He said, and when he hired him, he said, "I'm not going to pay you anything. I'll never pay you anything, because as soon as I pay you, you will start thinking like an employee." And that's the first thing you don't want to do if you want to become rich. You don't want to think like an employee. Because once you get used to a paycheck and you think that's what you're worth and that's what's important in life, is that paycheck, you cannot become rich. That's gone. So he started just following his rich dad around and learning from him. And the other thing they did was they played Monopoly. And so after years of playing Monopoly with his friend's rich dad, he said, "Well, when are you going to teach me how to become rich?" And he said, "Well, what do you think I've been doing? That's why we're playing Monopoly. Is that you have to learn that you go out and buy, 3 green houses, and then you buy a hotel. That's what you do. In getting rich, you play Monopoly, but for real." And that's basically, part of his. He now, I think he said he owns something like 700 properties now. No, it's more than that. 7,000, might have been tens of thousands. I don't remember now. I got to have to look that up and put it as a question. I forget what it was. It was a lot more than 700. It was a lot more than that. I'm thinking it was in the hundreds of thousands. He owns hundreds of thousands of properties, I think. Anyway, a massive amount. And a lot of it, like I say, a lot of his wealth is based on that. I did put down a few notes in here that would help you. Oops. That I thought were key concepts of his that I would talk about. I think I gave you 2 videos to watch from him that covered these and put in more detail on these ideas. One, he said basically he kind of did his old quadrants. His quadrants was there's 4 career paths in this world. One is to be somebody else's employee. And most people go to college to become somebody else's employee. One is to become self-employed. He said that's not really ideal either. But if you become self-employed, like you become a doctor. Doctor makes lots of money. His dad made lots of money. But from his perspective, he died poor. He didn't really have many assets when he died. He was paid a lot of money, but he spent his money like most people do. Everybody who's on a wage spends their money. And so whether it's for a bigger house or a bigger car or whatever, they get paid, they spend their money. And so as an employee, it doesn't really matter how much you make, you're going to spend it all. But it's also true if you're self-employed. And so my son-in-law is a doctor. He makes lots of money. They have a really big house. They also have 7 kids. Help spend their money. But his point is, and I see it in my son-in-law's life, he's working his butt off being self-employed. So he's working a lot harder than a typical employee. He is making good money. But he basically, if he died today, he'd be poor. I mean, he would leave my daughter and their children. The children are now getting older, so, 2 of them are in college now. And the third one is just graduating next month from high school, and he'll be off too. So they're getting some out of the nest, so to speak. But he may have some insurance and stuff, but basically he's not gonna. If he died, he would not leave my daughter wealthy. She would probably figure out to get by. She has a college degree. She was a very good student. She's very smart. She chose to be a housewife and to raise kids and stuff, and let the husband do what he did. But she could go back to work. And she basically went at work to help him get through med school and stuff. But he's not wealthy in a sense that he can't stop working. In fact, that's one of the definitions. He kind of in some of his videos he makes a point of this, and some he uses the wrong word according to him. To him, when he was doing this four quadrants, he said there's a difference between being rich and wealthy. Rich may be that you have quite a few assets, but you can't walk away from it. You're dependent on your self-employment or so forth. You're not so Your wealth is not such that you can just stop working. Um, so anyway, he sees a different path. So the other part here is being a business entrepreneur. He says is different than being self-employed. That's not. Even though in a sense it is, like my son-in-law, he could never quit working at what he's doing. Maybe someday he could if he really made it a high priority. He could start investing some of the money he's making. In other words, he could become a business entrepreneur with some of the money he's making. But otherwise, he can't quit working. In fact, he's not only working; he's working probably 80 hours a week. He's working really long hours. He comes back late most nights, and he brings home work at night, filling out reports and stuff, and making notes from all the people he talked to during the day, all the patients. So he puts in very long hours during the week, and so he not only can't quit, he can't even stop. He can't even reduce the number of hours he's doing at this point. With 7 kids, lots of things they want to do. They do a lot of things. He does squeeze in time for the family, but he also puts in a lot of hours. When they go to bed, he goes back to work again in his home office in order to continue making the money he's making to support all that. So the idea of being a business entrepreneur is actually going back to what Ben Horowitz was saying, is a business entrepreneur should look to hiring people better than they are, smarter than they are, so that they can walk away. In other words, the business is making money. You don't have to be there to make money. So that's his distinction, and he says that's wealth. If you have a business that you can walk away from, that's wealth. It's making money while you go to the beach, whatever you want to do. So if you're going to be a business entrepreneur, he says that's what you need to aim at. So you need to hire people who can replace you and do your job hopefully better than you're doing it. And so you can reinvest your time, either retire or reinvest it into other things like he does. And then the other part, the fourth one, is as an investor. And that could be in stock. I have a friend here in Malaysia that is retired at, I think he's about to turn 50, but he retired a few years ago, all in investments. And in his case, he's doing mostly stock investments. Now, if you're good at it, you can retire early on stock investments. He also I think he has 4 kids, and they live very, very well. They travel. He's basically semi-retired now, so he watches his stock, but then he can do that from anywhere in the world. So several times a year they go off traveling to some place to experience something new around the world. So you can do it with stock. Kiyosaki doesn't like stock, though. He likes real estate. He thinks that's real. He wants real estate. And he's still playing Monopoly like his rich dad taught him, buy 4 houses, whatever, and then buy a hotel. I mean, that's sense. And one of the things he teaches goes down to the last one here, to debt or not to debt. What is the answer? He says, love debt. He says, that's not for everybody. You have to have a different mindset in order to love debt. He said that when you're dealing in real estate, that's the amazing thing, is that banks will give you money to invest. So in most investments, if you buy stock, people don't give you money to invest in stock. But a bank will give you money to invest in real estate. So that's one of the main differences he sees, is that you go in with $1,000, or maybe you may need more. Nowadays, you may need more than that. But say you go in with $10,000 or $20,000, and they will give you $200,000. They'll give you 10 times as much money as you have to go buy the real estate. And so he just keeps, now he's doing hundreds of millions of dollars. So that's a number where it has to be more than 700 properties. I think he said he just refinanced his property, and it saved him $200 million or something by going down to a lower interest rate. And so he knows how to play the banks. He knows how to play. Also, he talks a lot about tax advantages. Wouldn't be the same in every country, but I think a lot of countries follow the United States when it comes to taxes. And one of the things the United States does is that if you are investing your money and pull money out from an investment, they don't tax as much as if you're making an income, a wage. So as an employee, they actually tax you harder than if you're an investor. And so that's one of the reasons why he says he basically when he makes money somehow, he reinvests it into real estate because then he can he can eliminate his taxes. That's one of his strategies is don't pay taxes. Figure out with your the investment into real estate you can eliminate your taxes, at least in America. There's just different ways of doing that. And so he needs to be very smart, and so he does. He's got his education also from accountants and tax lawyers and people like that to figure out how what real estate to buy and how to manipulate things so he would pay as little tax as possible in that sort of investment. So that's why he likes real estate. Is again, he can take a little bit of money and get the bank to give them a lot because they feel like their investment is safe because there's property. It's property, and they always if you don't make your payments, they take the property back. So as long as you can make some money from that property, and if it will more than pay for itself, then that's a great deal. You take somebody else's money, you buy some property, and that property pays you money. And so that goes to the other things, the 6 key concepts for entrepreneurs. Basically, this is if you want to go get a loan, a major loan, this is what they're asking for. They want to know your expenses, your assets, your liabilities, your income, expenses, assets, liabilities, and cash flow. And one of the first things he was talking about you need to understand is that a house can be either an asset or a liability. The question is it bringing you money or are you spending money on it? If you're spending money on it, it's then a liability. But if it's part of your cash flow and it's making money for you, now it's an asset. So it's not really, he doesn't look at it in terms of could you sell it? He doesn't look at it that way. He looks at it very simplistically. Is it making you money? If you're buying, well, he didn't feel like his dad had a really big house, very fancy house. But that was basically his only investment, maybe a little bit of stock. He had very little investment despite how smart he was and how good a job he had, how much money he made. Relatively little to leave to his wife and family when he died. So again, looking at it from a real estate perspective, he goes in and borrows money for property that will make him money. And so now it becomes an asset. And it becomes the other thing they're looking at is what's your cash flow. So if you want to borrow a lot of money, they want to see what your cash flow is. So if you have lots of property and it's producing cash flow, then of course they're going to let you borrow more money. And the thing about this, you don't want to come to it because it then inhibits your growth. But ultimately, what you're risking is your credit rating. If you don't make money and you lose money in America, the bankruptcy laws are really pretty almost silly and how easy they are. You can use a credit card and go buy tens of thousands of dollars worth of stuff, clothes, fur coats, whatever. You declare bankruptcy, the bank won't take that stuff from you. If it's not immediately resellable, now maybe a fur coat possibly, probably not though. But if you don't have things that they can sell easily to give back to the people you owe money to, you get to keep it. They can't take your house. As long as you're making payments on the house, and that's not something you owe money on, then the bankruptcy court will not take your house from you. Your car, if you need your car to go to work, they will not take your car from you. And so the bankruptcy laws in America are pretty easy. And so some people just plan to go bankrupt. They're going to get credit cards and stuff, and they're going to buy everything they want, and then they plan, but then you can't, you won't be able to get a loan for like 10 years. So you don't want to do that. That kind of hurts the idea of how to make money if you can't get a loan then for 10 years. But that's the worst that's going to happen, at least under American bankruptcy laws. You don't make payments, you give the houses back, and you start back at scratch again. And even then, there's ways of getting around that. If you have a partner, for example, or if you have a corporation, the corporation's the one that owes it, the corporation can go bankrupt. You don't go bankrupt necessarily. So there's also legal ways to make it so that you're still able to keep going because your corporation went bankrupt. You form a new corporation, find a new partner, whatever, you keep going. So he has a very pragmatic approach to it, and so he loves debt. He said, obviously, somebody who can't control their spending and is spending money on things that are frivolous should cut up their credit cards. They should not they shouldn't have any debt. Their goal should be have no debt because they don't know how to handle debt. But if the point of debt is to invest it, then the thing that you can get money for the easiest to invest is for real estate. Like I said, you walk in with a few $1,000s and they multiply that by about 10 and let you go buy some property because it's a secure investment from their perspective. So he said most people don't understand these things. They don't understand how to make out a financial statement with which to go get a loan. They need to understand these 6 words and how to work them, how to work on them so they can go get a loan. The real key to wealth is know how to manage your cash flow. If you learn how to manage your cash flow, you can become wealthy. I'm not going to say much about Mel Robbins. She one of the ideas is just actually the name of this video. She basically went through divorce and she was very depressed. She had a hard time just getting out of bed in the morning. And so she had to learn some things. And one of them is you just have to get out of bed. And you have to do things that are hard for you, that you don't feel like doing. And so one of the things she started studying psychology, among other things, and wrote some books on the subject, is that our minds are made to prevent us from hurting and from being uncomfortable. So if we have a really good idea and we wait too long and we don't act on that good idea, basically we're giving our mind the opportunity to make us uncomfortable and to protect us from being disappointed. And so our minds will talk us out of it. So she has a rule basically that once she decides something, she makes a commitment within 5 seconds. After 5 seconds, her mind will talk her out of it. And it started just by the fact that that's how she got herself out of bed in the morning. So her alarm would ring, and instead of reaching over and turning it off, she would count from 5 to 0. So it's like launching a rocket ship or whatever, 5, 4, 3. And by the time she got to 0, she would get out of bed. And so now she kind of does the same thing with anything that she finds hard. She starts cutting down from 5 and takes some action before she lets her mind talk her out of it. And she said that's basically from evolution, our minds have been programmed that way. That if we're uncomfortable about something, if we're scared of something, if we don't take action immediately, our mind will talk us out of it. And so this is kind of the bottom line with her, is this 5-second rule. And she takes it on, and she's written whole books. So obviously, 5-second rule could be done in half a chapter. But that's still kind of the basis of it, to help us understand the way our minds work, and to help us to understand that we have to defy our minds. Our minds will try to stop us from being uncomfortable, from taking risks, from doing anything to help us be successful. There's almost anything that, if you go all the way back to that first week, remember that 14-year-old black kid from the inner city that became a millionaire at age 14? One of the things he said that you maybe remember is, success, I'm not sure what the first word is, success is on the other side of fear. And some other people also that what's his name, Will Smith, said something like that too. He said, as he grew up, kind of like the other African American kid growing up. He had to make himself afraid of being afraid, so to speak. So he was afraid of talking himself out of being a success, and so he also faced those fears, and he would maybe he was counting down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, whatever he's doing to do, whatever it was he was afraid of. He also realized, like, forget the name of the kid that got whatever his name was, that became a millionaire at 14. He realized that what he wanted was on that other side of fear, and that he couldn't let the fear stop him. And that's what she's saying, is that our minds are programmed to talk us out of doing things that we're afraid of or that we're uncomfortable with, because it's trying to save us from whatever it is we're afraid of. But if we don't learn how to ignore it, then we will never accomplish anything really worthwhile, because it will talk us out of everything that's difficult, everything that is scary, everything that would lead to success. So her main thing is psychology and how to outsmart your mind in learning how to go, be successful in spite of the fears that you might feel. This one here, she's an educational professor, and she's done a lot of research with kids, but also realizes it's for true with adults also, that kids who have a fear of failure will sabotage themselves. And if anything, they might learn to cheat because they're afraid to fail. That's the main thing they're afraid of, is to fail. Kids who accept the challenge, and if they fail at something, they work harder, and they're convinced that they can succeed, and so they defy failure. Those ones are the ones that succeed in the long run. The ones who hate failure so much, or are so embarrassed by failure that they will cheat rather than fail, are the ones who never really succeed, because they're always finding some way around this discomfort they feel at having a challenge that's too big for them, that they feel is too big for them. They've done tests at the very bottom of the educational scale in America. You have at the very bottom migrant students, but right above them are Native American kids who live on reservations. They're paid by the government to do nothing. As part of our deal with the Native Americans, I mean, in some ways, I think the government should not. It made them all dependent on government, and so a lot of them have alcoholism problems. So in kind of paying them for taking their land from them, we really did them a lot of harm in saying, yeah, here's some land, go be lazy, we'll pay you welfare. And so they get drunk and they have, bad lives. And so the kids that live on the reservations are right near the bottom educationally. And so what she and her people did was they thought that if we could teach people that there's no educational challenge too big for them. And in fact, one thing they teach them is that every time you learn something, it builds a new neuron, I think it is. So you actually build your brain by learning new stuff. And so they taught them this concept and how not to be afraid of failure, but to learn from failure and to keep building, and that you could succeed. And ultimately, they took as an example a bunch of kids at a school that was all Native American kids, all kids growing up on the reservation, all kids who thought they were stupid, all kids who normally would be at the very bottom educationally. And they taught them these concepts, and suddenly in their area, they were the smartest school in the area. They just had to teach them not to believe that they couldn't learn, not to believe that it was, that was better to cheat than to accept the challenge and to learn from your failures, and that you're building your brain as you learn new stuff. And so they taught these kids these principles, and they became the highest scoring kid on the statewide test. in that region. Even smarter, they're right in the area with kids whose parents worked at Microsoft and Boeing. And these Indian kids beat them. And so just so she's talking about this. It's called mindset, is what she's focuses on. Is the idea that if you can set your mind on growth, and focus on growth and improvement, and not the fear of failure, and do whatever you have to do to not fail, not be embarrassed in front of your parents or whatever it is. If you focus them right, then you can get tremendous growth with kids. And I say that's true. That's kind of what we're talking about now with adults also. We have to not be afraid of failure, but we have to accept the challenge of improvement and growing and building our mind, building our understanding, our skills, so forth. And this last one here, I'm not going to tell you all of them. I'm going to just give you 3 examples. And this next slide is called persuasion. It's about selling. But it's kind of, if you remember the video we watched of the MIT professor who talked about the stupid things ways we make decisions, like whether or not to donate our organs when we're dead, all that sort of stuff. So this guy has a best-selling book on that subject, and all related about sales. And so here's just 3 examples. He has a whole bunch of examples in the video, and I'm purposely not giving you all the things that he teaches in the video, because I want you to watch the video. But here's 3 of them. You can pre-program a buyer's priority. So the example is an online furniture store found that it could sell more comfortable, expensive sofas if in the landing page, when people came to their website, it had a background with fluffy clouds that suggested comfort and so forth. Then people would start searching for, as they searched for sofas, they would start looking at the comfortable ones. And so they were much more likely to buy a comfortable couch if they had a background of clouds. If they changed the background, if all they did was change the background to money, then people would buy the cheapest sofa. And so just changing the landing page where people would come when they came to your store, your online store, what you have in the background can totally change their attitude and what they're going to shop for. Are they going to go for the fluffy, comfortable sofa, or are they going to go for the cheap sofa and save money? Well, of course, they wanted to buy the comfortable one, the one that's more expensive. They had a better profit margin. So they did this experiment, and so now they mostly have clouds on their landing pages, of course. Another example is social. Oops, running out of battery there. I didn't turn on the electricity. Social proof is what the concept helps persuade people. It's the idea that a lot of our peers are already making the choice. And one of the examples he gave is, quote, "This is one of the most popular items." With those words next to something on a menu, that will increase the sales of a restaurant dish by 13 to 20%. All you have to say is those words. One of our most popular items. Because then people think, well, everybody else is eating it, I better get it too. And so just subtle little things like that. In fact, he said that actually all it was an asterisk by the name of the dish, and then at the bottom of the menu it said one of the most popular dishes. So they had to actually go looking for what the asterisk meant, and it still made a 13 to 20% increase of sales. Scarcity causes a desire to buy. In other words, if there's not very many of this stuff, and so a supermarket did a test, and they wrote, and you'll see this probably in supermarkets you've been at, where they put on a little card below this brand, it says something like only X items per customer. And so you interpret that as meaning, this is so popular, they're not going to let me buy more stuff because they're saving some for other people. Well, that tells you immediately this must be really popular, and there's not very much of it. I better get my 6 items or whatever it is. And so, with the grocery store found that, I didn't put the number here. Oh, it's doubled. It doubled the sale of that. Any item they put that under, it doubled the sale of that by just saying, you can't buy very many of this stuff. So everybody bought as much as they could because it was scarce, obviously. So those are just three of the ideas that this author talks about in persuasion. How do you convert people by kind of helping program their mind before they actually do the purchase, or in making the purchase, as the case might be. Video, it's a 20-minute movie, actually, and if you haven't watched it, you'll enjoy it. It's called The Butterfly Circus, and it does star um, this guy here. I'll just open it, I guess. Nick Chichik, or whatever his name is, the limbless man. So he's the star of this 20-minute movie, and it's really a good movie. But we don't have time to watch it now. But I will ask the question on it. I do expect you to watch it, and I will say, the idea. Let me just give you kind of the idea with it. Is that he's in a circus as an oddity. So people just go in and they pay to see weird things, like really fat women or a woman with a beard or something like that. And in the old days, they used to do that stuff. Especially, I don't see it in circuses very much anymore. But in the 1800s, and this movie is set for the Great Depression, and even at that time, there were still at circuses where you saw strange people. One in this movie is Siamese twins, two women that were had their bodies were joined together. Um, in theory, I mean, I think it probably wasn't real, but that was the idea of them in this circus. And so the limbless man was one of the people that just look at and laugh at, and a couple of kids threw tomatoes at him and stuff. And so anyway, the butterfly circus. He wasn't part of the butterfly circus. He's another carnival with a lot of rides and stuff. But the butterfly circus, all the people that worked at the butterfly circus, or at least a lot of them, were people who were kind of cast aside, including a guy that was always drunk and beating people up, and he ended up being their strong man, showing lifting incredible things, and a gal who was a prostitute and got pregnant and got kicked out of the whorehouse, ended up being a star. What do you call that? On the trapeze and doing stuff, high wire stuff. And an old guy that used to be, I think he was a juggler and stuff. And anyway, he got old, and his circus threw him away basically, and so he was out just begging for money. Anyway, all these people were brought into the circus and trained up, and that was part of the butterfly circus. And so anyway, this guy, the limbless man, escaped from his circus and crawled into the pickup of the butterfly circus people when they happened to come by. One of the kids, the son of the former prostitute, wanted to go to the carnival, and so they went there. And so anyway, this guy saw them and snuck into their pickup, basically. And so the movie is basically how the limbless man became the star of the show. How the person who thought that he was no good, that he was just to be laughed at, he was trying to talk them into starting that part of the circus, just let people laugh at him. And the head of the circus said, no, that you can't have that attitude. That's not what we do here. And ultimately, he became the star of the circus. And so the analogy obviously is like a butterfly. It starts as as a worm basically, and then creates a cocoon and comes out a butterfly. So it's kind of that we have more capability than we give ourselves. We have more potential than we know we have. That we are butterflies, so to speak. When we think we're worms, we're really butterflies in the making, so to speak. And so it's really an inspiring movie, and maybe I give away the final thing of it, but it's still, you'll like it. It's a good movie. And so that's certainly one thing I want to emphasize as I close my last lecture, is that we do have much more potential than we give ourselves credit for. And you go back and hopefully you'll think about the things you learned during the semester. You think about how much more powerful you can be with if you're proactive. And some of that also ties into the idea of, that the success is on the other side of failure or other side of fear. And so you have to overcome that fear and be proactive and do stuff that will get you where you want to go. And our minds will try to fight you in that process. Our minds will try to say, that's scary. You're going to fail anyway. You don't want to do that. You're going to fail. Your mind will tell you that you're a worm. You're not a butterfly. You may want to be a butterfly, but you're just a worm. And that's your potential. But we all have more potential than that. And Johnny the Bagger is just one example. If he can change the future of a store and of a chain of stores, if Johnny can do it, we can do it. We just have to believe we can do it. So that then also goes to what that professor was saying, that basically we have to accept the challenge. We have to have the mindset of progress, that maybe we can't jump across the river in one jump, but we can build the stepping stones. We can put out the stepping stones to get where we want to go, if we're willing to do that. So all these things we've been talking about with all these different great authors and thinkers all kind of come together as you think about who you are, what you want to be, what you want to do in life. And I say it goes back to that first thing we learned with Dr. Cuffey of being proactive, is believing you can do it and just doing it. And maybe you start at something small, as I did at KMAP University, where I just showed up and said, I'm willing to help. And that would have included putting the chairs away, whatever. But becoming the person that they depended on, to the point where, before the conference, they have 7 things that has to be done, and they give me 4 of them, because other 12 people are only able to do 3 of them. So you just have to be the dependable one that keeps doing your best. And it doesn't mean you're the smartest person in the room. It's a person that gets things done. You're the proactive person. And then they learn to depend on you, and they want you around because you make them look better. And so you can move up very quickly to where you don't even understand where you got. I don't understand why the British ambassador wanted to come talk to me for an hour as she moved to Kazakhstan. I don't know who told her I was the person that could help her. I don't know why the National Investment Corporation that invests $80 billion would want me to come do consulting for them. I didn't apply for the job, but somehow I was the guy. And through my work at the research conference and other things, they called me up, come help us. Okay, whatever, I'll take your money. So sometimes you won't even understand how you got where you got, how you did what you did ultimately, how you got across the river that you didn't ever, in some cases, didn't even think about crossing, but you got there. And you just, because you took the steps, even not even knowing where you're going to. Us getting the $10 million for the NGO program in Central Asia. No idea I didn't know we were going after $10 million. That wasn't the idea. We were just going to try to do some good. And so we were going to set up what the Peace Corps worker wanted to do for 1 year. I just said, no, let's find people to help us do it ongoing. Let's keep it going. This is a good idea. Let's work on it and see where it'll take us. And no idea it was going to take us to $10 million and online training and 8 countries and so forth. There was no vision to that, but there was proactivity that led to that. And so sometimes while the vision is have it too and is important, in some cases you get beyond what you could envision by simply being the proactive person and always trying to do something better and trying to stretch yourself. And then suddenly you're at a vision that you think you never knew you had. You didn't really have. It just happened to you because you were the guy that they could depend on, that tried, just kept trying. Okay, so that's part of this message. I'm just going to watch a short clip from Pursuit of Happiness, and we'll wrap it up there. I took I put together pieces of different videos on YouTube. And so consequently, there's some hesitancy of letting me upload it, even though they came from other videos and it's promoting the. I wanted to add in here that Chris Gardner of the Pursuit of Happiness, I showed that video to those that were in class and for the last lecture. And many of you, if you have not seen Pursuit of Happiness, you should. With Will Smith, did a great job with that. And it is a true story, essentially. I saw an interview with the actual Chris Gardner, and he said that most of it was true, or at least essentially true. He noted that instead of having a 5-year-old son like the movie version of Chris Gardner had, he actually had a 2-year-old son when his wife left him, and he wasn't sure what to do. Was trying to break into becoming a stockbroker, and well, that was one of the most, so he was living with a 2-year-old for a while as a homeless person, living in a into a restroom at the train station or whatever else he was going through. And then when he did start to work, he had to leave his baby or his toddler anyway with people that he didn't always know very well, getting babysitting and stuff, and so that was very hard. So anyway, he's a real person, and he went through a lot of those things, and I would just add that anybody who is an entrepreneur or even proactive in any way, you're going to have some failures. You're not always going to succeed at everything you do. Certainly true for me. And sometimes, like I say, you may think you have the best idea ever and it just doesn't work. You have to expect that. And even though, as I mentioned, Mark Andreessen said you don't want to. To him, it was not a positive thing to say that failure is good. He said he hates failure, and that certainly want to avoid failure at all costs. But despite that, we actually do learn a lot from failure, and most entrepreneurs do fail at some point. That's just part of it. And in America, the average is 90% of all new enterprises fail. So it's the 1% or the 10% that actually, or 1 out of 10, however you want to say it, 10%, that that make it, and in some cases become very big enterprises and end up hiring a lot of people and so forth. Half of all the jobs in America basically are with small companies like that. So they're not all big corporations. And some of those are quite successful, and some are not so successful. And even outside of entrepreneurship, as I was saying, if you're a professor like myself, who I'm trying to do different things, trying to be proactive, trying to help people, some of those are successful, some of them are not successful. So there's what's called social entrepreneurship, where you try to do things to help make society better. And some of those things work, some of them don't. We were surprised. I'm surprised. I'm still surprised, even though I'm the one that said, when the Peace Corps worker came to me and said she wanted to do the NGO project in Kazakhstan, and I'm the one that insisted that we try to make it forever. I don't think that anybody's any more surprised than I am that it's that we ultimately got $10 million in funding, and it's in 10 years it's published 10 books and held 10 international conferences and done is now working in 8 different countries. So it's sometimes, again, just being proactive gets you further than you think, than you dreamed or envisioned. Easy. just like Ben Horowitz said, he waking up every 2 or 3 hours, crying himself back to sleep again when he got stuck and didn't know if he's had to close down his company before he sold it for for $1 billion or whatever. It, I haven't obviously achieved that level of success, but I can tell you, even buying that first publishing company was a lot of hard work. And a lot of times I just didn't know it was worth it. A lot of other times in my career, there's been those times too. You're just not sure. So sometimes you have to be prepared to fight through it. But I think I thought about this a lot in my life, that the things that have been the hardest have been the things that I treasure most. Now that I get older, if I want to tell my story, and I haven't told you a lot of things that would have been interesting in my life, but the things I tell when I tell my story, I tell the interesting stuff. The interesting stuff is some of the hardest stuff. If it's too easy, you don't even remember it. You don't appreciate it if it's too easy. It really does require, a little bit of pain to make it memorable. And at the time, you may not have liked that pain. And I was literally, I decided I had a hernia, a sports center hernia, and I decided to get surgery in Kazakhstan. And I figured, who could screw up? I knew Kazakhstan didn't have a great healthcare system, but I thought, who can screw up a hernia? And I had 2 other hernia surgeries, and the last one, it was outpatient. You go in, you had your surgery, and went home same day. And so that's the norm of American medicine. And so I figured out, anybody can do a hernia surgery. Anyway, so I go into the hospital in Kazakhstan, and they don't have, in America, they'd put you totally out. So you don't remember anything because you're asleep while they do the surgery. Well, they don't do that in Kazakhstan because they don't have good enough anesthesiologists, apparently. So they insisted on doing a spinal. So they put stuff into my spine to make part of my body go dead, basically. And so they kept pinching my toe, saying, okay, can you feel this? Can you feel this? And they kept putting more stuff in. Can you feel this? Can you feel this? And it took a long time before I finally said, yeah, no, I don't feel that. So then they took their scalpel and stabbed me in the stomach. And I felt that because, and just looking at Google, it tells you that the spinal that they gave me does not always deaden things above the waist. And apparently the surgeon didn't read that part of Google. He didn't bother to Google while he was getting his doctor's, his MD. And so I felt the whole operation as they stabbed me and then cut down and put in the fabric and sewed it back up again. I could feel myself going into shock. But first off, all these guys were talking Russian, and I wasn't sure. My Russian's not very good, so I didn't know what to say. And what good would it do to scream? They weren't going to unstab me. They just stabbed me in the stomach, for heaven's sake. So what do I do? So I could feel myself going into shock, and if you go into shock, it can kill you, by the way, because your organs start shutting down when you go into shock. And so I knew that from taking first aid. And so in my mind, I was thinking of, there was a series in America called 24. I don't know if you've ever seen 24, but anyway, 24 stars a guy that's basically a terrorist fighter. He's fighting terrorism all the time. And he kept getting caught and being tortured. And so in my mind, I was thinking of Jack Bauer, the terrorist fighter, being tortured. And so in my mind, I thought, okay, I'm going to get through this. If Jack Bauer can do it, I can get through this. Talk myself out of going into shock and possibly dying from it. And anyway, so I finally got through the surgery. And then they had put so much stuff into me, trying to get me to go dead, that it was like 6 hours before I could feel my legs again. And then that made me worry because they kept saying, you sure you can't feel anything yet? So I was laying there, and they, every so often they'd pinch me again, say, you can't feel anything? And I thought, oh no, I'm paralyzed for life. And that was actually just the start of it. Later on, they for 3 days. In Kazakhstan, they keep you there for a few days. I guess maybe 5 days. I don't remember now. But anyway, uh, about the third day, I think I was there. They had this drip going in for antibiotic and stuff. And the doctor apparently, he was there on the Saturday and apparently wanted to go golfing or something. So he had them turn up the drip. And I never really associated it, but within, by that night, I was having severe headaches that were much more painful than being stabbed in the abdomen. And I didn't get rid of the headaches till I left and realized that it was because he turned up the drip and nobody would turn it down because he was the doctor. So it was somehow making my head swell on top of everything else. So it was a really bad experience. But it's also kind of funny now. It wasn't then, but I kind of think about that as life. You can go through some terrible experiences, but if you're going to tell a story about your life, what are you going to tell about? It's the interesting stuff. Okay, it's not the easy stuff that you're going to tell about. So now at my age, at 70, I can tell the hard stuff and laugh about it. And life is kind of like that. Try to keep perspective on it, and it may be hard. It will be hard. Success is hard. Maybe some people are lucky and they get through it, and it's not particularly hard for some people, especially if they come from a family that already has money. Then maybe it's not going to be hard. But for most people, it's hard. It's going to be painful along the way, and you have to anticipate that and not be afraid of it, and put it in perspective. Everything's going to be okay. If you force into bankruptcy, if you're, whatever happens. If you're all up all night for many nights in a row trying to, get your product out or whatever, it's going to work. It's going to work out, and including failure. There are sometimes you really can learn from failures. One of these guys, I think it was Andreessen, said he hates failures. Forget about that. Failure is not fun. You don't want it. And that's true. You don't want to invite it. And so, but you shouldn't romanticize it. He's saying don't romanticize it. Do everything you can to avoid failure. But if you have failure, you learn from it, and then go on. And that's definitely one of the concepts of Robert Kiyosaki is that as an entrepreneur you can count on failing sometimes. You'll fail, but you just don't stop. When he was one of the top salespeople for IBM. He did take a job out of college. He did take a job, and he did really good at sales. And then he did really well, and they gave him at the end of the year they gave him $30,000 bonus on top of everything he made. So he was obviously very good. And that was the day he quit. And somebody else had quit and came back, and they said, "You're going to be back." He said, "I'm not coming back. I'm an entrepreneur." So that was the last time he ever got a salary. It was age, like 25 or something like that. He walked away from IBM, a good salary and good bonuses, and determined he was never going to be an employee again. But he said, there were a lot of painful times getting to where he wanted to go. And the other guy predicted he would give up and come back because he was doing so well as an employee. But he was committed. I'm done. I'm not an employee anymore. I'm an entrepreneur. And that's, whether you decide to be an entrepreneur or not, as you proceed in life, there will be failures. And there will be times when you want to give up on something. Just encourage you don't give up. Keep going ahead. You guys have any questions on how to wrap up? Anybody let me open up the talk line again. For those of you in China, where are we here? Let me open up the chat box in case anybody else that's on Zoom has a question. I'll go ahead and actually enlarge that. Anybody there can text a question. You guys have any questions on how this is wrapping up then? So you'll see that everything is supposed to be done. I'm letting some of your final, the stuff, your entries, your journal entries are coming closer together. And at this point, I think you can't redo them anymore because you're too tight to the end. So you don't have time to get it back and redo it. So so with what you're doing now, you have one shot at it. So just do your best. I think the last one is due on Monday, and I think I also extended the last quiz. I gave you a longer period of time that you can do it, as far as when you can start it, but it's still only like I haven't finished the last quiz, but it'll probably still be only 20 or 30 minutes at the most. And whenever you start, you've got that amount of time. But I think I give you until I think it's Monday morning at 10 or something is when that last quiz closes. And I don't remember all the deadlines. As far as the journal entries, whatever Turnitin says will be your deadline for both. In fact, at this point, these last few, you don't upload them for your 2 point. You don't upload for 2 points anymore. That'll whatever's your last journal entries will get the grade, the average of your other grades, minus the worst two will be taken out, and everything else that's not graded will be the average of the ones that are graded. So. So anyway, these last few, once you upload, they're done. No redoing them. There's no time left. So I think that's what we're doing. So in fact, I will probably tomorrow even I'll start regrading the ones that are already. I think all the early ones in tomorrow. No, today. Tonight, I think is when you could no longer change any of your like 1 through 10 or whatever of your journal entries. So at least at some point there, it ends on the 17th, which is today. And so as of tomorrow, I'll start grading some of the stuff that you can no longer change anymore. So I can start coming up with a final grade for those, and so then on Monday I can start. I can just have a few left to work on, and turn around and get the grades submitted by Tuesday or Wednesday or something. Okay. Is there any other questions? If you have some, okay. No, not this year, not this semester. So basically everything, in fact, I don't want you to upload a whole copy, just everything. I'm going to grade it from, the ones you turned into Moodle, I might look, no, I'll be doing everything from Turnitin actually, because you've upgraded some of the ones that you got grades on. So I will go to the original or to the ultimate source, which is Turnitin, and grade everything from Turnitin. So you don't have to put them together and make one document. In other semesters they did, but this semester, for one thing, if you uploaded an entire document, it would all be plagiarism. You'd be plagiarizing yourself. So as far as Moodle or as far as Turnitin, they would think you were plagiarizing. So that makes a mess of it. So I'll look at each of your entries separately because the system knew that I gave you permission to resubmit, and so they didn't count that as plagiarism. But if you submitted a whole document, it would. So I'm not going to ask you to do that either. Okay. Okay. Well, thanks for being in the class.